I'm Andrew Sherman. I'm a Texas transplant who has always been in pursuit of art as a career. I've played in bands, pursued an acting career in Hollywood, but I found it behind the lens of a camera here in Dallas, Texas. I was born in New York, I've lived in Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, but I love Dallas. There's a magical artistic scene in Dallas that mostly goes unnoticed to the outside world. This podcast is focused on what makes it so special and the people who make it thrive artistically. If you don't live here, and even if you do, you might not have heard of them. This is the Dallas Famous Podcast.
So who you gonna be? Who you gonna be when you're all grown up? Who you gonna be? Who you gonna be when you're all for us? Yeah.
This week on the Dallas Famous Podcast is Dave Hinson. Dave owns Killer Vintage Guitars here in Dallas, his second shop along with the original in St. Louis. Hinson also makes guitar pickups used by Steve Miller, The Edge, and Keith Urban, just to name a few. He's the guitar expert for the upcoming season of Pawn Stars to be filmed here in Dallas. He's the main guitar advisor for Heritage Auctions, guitar appraiser on Antique Roadshow, and he helped write the price guide for Vintage Guitar Magazine. He's friends with Billy Gibbons and Vince Gill, and of course he still plays live. Sit back for this great chat with Dave Hinson. We're back here at the Dallas Famous Podcast. I'm sitting in Killer Vintage Guitars in Dallas with Dave Hinson.
Hi.
Hi.
Morning. Good morning.
Good morning. It is morning. Let's just jump in with. So I'm aware that this is not the first Killer Vintage shop, right? There's one in St. Louis.
The original store is in St. Louis, and it's still going. I mean, it's been there since '94 is when I opened that. But I had been dealing guitars since the early '70s. I would say.
You opened that one.
I opened that one. Yeah.
Okay, and since the '70s. Okay, and then let's just jump straight past it to like what brought you to Dallas.
It was around 2009. Oddly enough, I'd opened the second store in a concert venue in St. Louis called The Pageant. And at that same time, I got a call from, there's a big auction house based here, Heritage Auctions, and they called and asked me to work as their guitar expert, primarily electrics, which is my strong point. So I started doing that, and over the course of the first year or so, around 2010, I was like, why isn't there a cool vintage shop in Dallas? Because there wasn't then. So I decided to do it. And actually, there was a friend of mine in Denver who used to be in Houston. He was actually one of the first vintage dealers, Kurt Linhoff. Kurt was infamous for he sold Dwayne Allman his Dark Burst, the one he bought at the Fillmore in '71.
Oh, wow.
And then he also unearthed and both these guitars came out of San Antonio, oddly enough. Kurt's store was in Houston called Specialty Guitars. And the second one was the Futura, which was a prototype of what later became the Explorer in 1958. But yeah, Kurt and I he was my best friend, and we had talked about opening a store in Dallas. And then Kurt passed away in 2014. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. So
wow.
Here it is, and it's been okay, and I'm still working for Heritage Auctions as the guitar expert. I have no other skills, just guitars.
You're pretty good skilled at it.
I play music around town with several different variations, and I have been the guitar. I read at one of the writers of the Vintage Guitar Price Guide for Vintage Guitar Magazine and the Blue Book of Guitars, an advisor. And I've been appraiser on the Antique Roadshow over the last few seasons, and now I'm the guitar expert on Pawn Stars.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which we'll be filming here in May.
In Dallas?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Oh, scoop. Okay, well, but Dallas specifically, it's just you came here and you just saw this need because of...
Well, partially, and I'd had a lot of friends. There's a local blues legend named Bugs Henderson, and Bugs and I were really good friends. My band opened for his band when he played St. Louis for years, and he had been, why don't you come to Dallas? Why don't you go open a store in Dallas? Why don't you Killer Vintage in Dallas? And it's like, yeah, all right. So, and I guess I sort of had a tie to Dallas anyway, because most people in the music world, as David Crosby told me one time, your T-shirts are legendary. I said, so are you. But I'm the guy that did the Oswald shirt, where it always looked to me like Oswald was singing, so he has an Elvis mic, and then The Dallas homicide detective J.R. Lavelle has the 335, which is mine, which I still have. Actually, he used to come out to guitar shows in the 90s and sign posters and T-shirts for people in my booth. He was actually a guitar player.
Interesting.
Too.
That's cool. Yeah, wow. I mean, you're like, I just do guitars, but like all the different things you're doing just with guitars, it's a lot.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, was part of the reason, too, the scene here? I mean, the
Well, there's a great music scene here. I mean, there's between here and Fort Worth, which I really need to learn more about.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening. St. Louis, unfortunately, used to be it's this home of rock and roll. It all started there with Chuck Berry and Ike Turner,
Mm-hmm.
and Albert King lived there. And but since the last 20 years, really, it's sort of just become nothing. There's no real scene there for new music. There's a lot of tribute bands and outrageously successful tribute bands.
It's frustrating. That's a whole other
When
animal.
you see, there's a band there, I don't want to say too much about it because two of the guys work for me at my shop in St. Louis, but they do a Pink Floyd thing called them Monstero. And last year they sell out the amphitheater for 22,000 seats.
Wow.
And In Living Color opened for the tribute band.
What? Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding.
I've never.
I'm not going to comment on it
Yeah.
either, but
Other than like a city festival, I've never heard anything like that.
right.
Crazy. Yeah. Also, I mean, I'm around at a lot of shows. I feel like maybe more Americana type, and I'll see you there, and it seems like you're teching or you're bringing guitars. What are you doing exactly?
Well, I do tech for Texas Gentlemen when they are Ryan Bingham's backup band.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, I'm working for Ryan Bingham, but they're fabulous. What a fabulous band, the Texas Gentlemen.
I
are.
love those guys. Yeah.
They're amazing.
Yeah. I think I got wind of them when I first was in Dallas working on the Chevy Music Showcase. They were backing up Creamer and then Leon Bridges for that. And
right.
and I was like, we should just do a whole show about them. And then the show ended, so we didn't get to. But
yeah, no, they're amazing. Nick Lee's one of the
yes,
craziest, best guitar players ever.
Yeah.
I told somebody he's like it was Doyle. They were opening for Archangels last year.
Yeah.
I went out with him on that, and Doyle said something, and I said, dude, you got to listen to Nick. I said, he's a combination of Lowell George and Jeff Beck rolled into one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and he's so humble, and I feel like more people should know about him, but he's just so humble.
Now, Nick works here part-time.
Does he?
He's doing our videos for the guitars, the listings.
Oh, cool.
He
Awesome.
just started doing that this week.
Yeah, I mean, I must have seen him in 7, 8 times. I mean, I was at that show you're talking about.
Right.
It was a great one.
Oh, yeah, right.
So wait, let's back up too. So you said you've opened for some of these guys. You're still playing guitar, you said.
I do. Yeah, I'm playing a duo with this fabulous girl singer from here, and there's another band I play in, and then a friend of mine, Dean Fearing, the chef. I played in his band, but although we haven't been doing anything for a while, we will again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
enough to keep me get me out of the house,
Right.
off the couch.
Yeah, keep it going. So obviously this place has, I mean, well, you're friends with some legends, but there's some legends that come in here. Can we talk
Yeah.
about some of those people?
Sure.
I mean, first off, well, you're friends with Vince Gill for a while, you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vince is great. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you guys meet?
You know, he was playing in a band with some guys from St. Louis, a guy named John Chump and this steel player named Bob Breidenbach, and we all went to high school together. I mean, Vince is a little bit younger than me, not much, a little bit. So he was playing with those guys, and he actually left that band to move to L.A. and join Pure Prairie League. So that was around mid-'70s, I guess, is when I ran across Vince for the first time, and then we sort of lost touch and then got back in touch actually through his wife's old guitar player, a guy named Will Owsley, who unfortunately killed himself the night of the Nashville flood. But then since then Vince and I were really close. He's gotten some great guitars from me. He swears the best acoustic he owns he got from me about 8 years ago. It's a 1929 Martin OM 45. Just
Oh, wow.
you can hear angels sing.
Yeah. I bet. Also, God, name is eluding me right now, but ZZ Top.
Billy?
Yeah, Billy Gibbons.
Yeah, Billy's great.
Yeah.
Billy and I, I've known Billy off and on. Again, it's one of those where I met him back in the 70s, 80s maybe, and then over the last 10, 12 years, 15 years probably. He's the Reverend's great. He just, you may hear from him for a while, and then you may not for a while, and then you will, and then he'll just turn up.
Nice.
But no, he's great. He's actually I've been working on this project making a PAF pickup. PAF is the humbucker Gibson came out with in 57 through 61 or 2. And that's the sort of the holy grail of guitar pickups, humbuckers anyway. And I've been working with this Japanese lady in LA, Sayoko, to make a pickup that sounded exactly like that, which we did. And Gibbons heard him. He's got him on all his guitars and asked him, "Do you want a partner?" But so we're sort of entwined through the pickup thing again now. So
that's cool. That's very cool. Also, so I have a mutual friend, and he said that you have talked about being around the Grateful Dead early on. Is that right?
yeah, I used to know those guys really well back in the early 70s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
John McIntyre was their manager, Uncle John's band.
Yeah.
And he was a St. Louis guy. Bill Kreutzmann was a St. Louis guy too.
Oh.
He went to WashU. So yeah, I knew those guys pretty well for a few years.
I mean,
Back in the day.
right?
But when they tried there's a really cool old theater in St. Louis called the Fox Theater. It was built in the 20s, maybe 30s, but it's ornate and gorgeous, absolutely fabulous. But it had sort of become a little bit not so shining light back then. And they tried to buy the theater in the city blocked the sale. They didn't want them to own it.
Oh, no.
And some billionaire ended up buying it and restoring it, which is still going. It's
All right. And then I think they
gorgeous.
played shows there after that too, I believe.
I don't know if they played there anymore after that.
Or maybe it was before that. Yeah, there's some classic shows from Fox Theater.
But yeah, through around, I think it was around 72 or 3 is when they tried to buy it. Didn't happen.
No, I wonder how music would have looked if they would have ended up planted there instead of San Francisco.
So like I say, back then, St. Louis had an incredible music scene. I mean, you used to see what became the Hourglass played. They used to play in teen clubs, and I was like 13. We'd go see this place up by the airport called the Castaways. It was underneath a IGA grocery store. It was the basement of the grocery store. It was a teen club.
Nice.
And the Hourglass played there. Well, there was an area in St. Louis that, again, St. Louis is known for doing everything wrong you should do with a city. If you want to look at it, just look at everything they've done. There was an area called Gaslight Square. In the 50s, 60s, it was like the hot spot. And it was one of the had-to-play places like Smothers Brothers, Phyllis Diller, all the big community, Barbara Streisand, all those people played at Gaslight Square, or in Gaslight Square, which is sort of like the Reeperbahn would have been in Hamburg where the Beatles played. But the city, again, destroyed it by the late 60s. It was pretty bad. Crime and a lot of empty buildings as businesses were moving out because of the crime and whatnot. And the city wouldn't do anything to do it. But that's where those guys would play, in the Crystal Palace. There was another one, something in the 20s. But sometimes they'd get up there and the club would be, they usually stayed at a friend of mine, Joe Marshall's house, in his basement, his parents' house in Florissant. And then they'd get up and there wouldn't be a gig because I'd end up playing over at the Castaways, squeezing in. There'd be like 4 bands sometimes a night, and they'd be one of them. It's funny. That's where I met Dwayne around that 67 probably.
Okay.
He was in a music store, Tower Grove Music. We heard a couple friends of mine were walking in, and we heard this guy guitar playing from the 2nd floor. And it was like, what the fuck is that? And there was this guy, Chuck Connors, who had above this place called Tower Grove Music, above he had Chuck Connors Professional Music, and he had like real Marshalls and Voxes and all this English gear that nobody had seen yet. And Dwayne was up there with this guy, Joe Marshall, that I mentioned earlier, who ended up with his guitar, the Fillmore guitar, after he passed away. And he had it and played it in bars in St. Louis for 25 years until Dwayne's daughter, Galadriel, was old. I think when she was 21, he gave it to her. She still has it. I think it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or it might be at the Big House. But they, that's Dwayne. We asked the store owner, "Who's playing up there?" And he goes, "Oh, some friend of Joey's." And he came down, and Joe introduced us all to him. And he told Chuck, he said, "I'm going to get me one of the Marshalls." That was the first time he played through a Marshall, supposedly.
Right. Oh, that's pretty cool. Hey, let me like go back even further. Like for you, like what? First of all, what drew you to music? Like, what was the first music that, as a child or whenever that?
My dad played guitar, and my uncles, they had like a little band back way before in the '40s, and played on the radio in St. Louis. And my sister sang. They used to drag me to a lot of gospel concerts. I saw the Blackwood Brothers, the Statesmen, and all those touring, vocal groups, which was really cool, actually.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a Baptist church where the music was good too. So
okay,
that's the one thing you'll find guitars in those kind of churches.
Interesting.
Because the music is really
And then
important.
What was it about the guitar specifically that drew you in?
I was in 5th grade. I came home from with a slip to join the school band, and it was I could play drums. And I brought it home, and my dad said, "There's no way you're playing drums." So he took his guitar, and we went over to my local music store, and a lot of people know who this guy, Mel Bay. And Mel Bay actually wrote a book that everybody of our generation learned to play out of. I mean, worldwide. Mel Bay is the method you learn to play guitar with. Mel was from St. Louis and had a store in St. Louis. And he was my dad's teacher in the '40s. So I started taking lessons over at Mel Bay's place. I was 11. And then the Beatles hit a couple of years later, and I was playing Ventures and Dwayne Eddy stuff.
That's pretty cool.
That.
Nice.
So it's something my mom wished I'd outgrown, but it seems to have worked out okay.
It seems like it. I was actually wondering about the guitar pick collection. Like apparently in St. Louis, like everybody brings their picks in.
Oh, I've got a bunch of I have a pile of cans full of picks.
Right. Some
from over the years,
like some pretty interesting ones, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can go through those sometime if you want.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I heard a rumor that you have a Jerry Garcia pick.
Maybe. I don't know. What's
you don't even... Okay, well then we're definitely going to have to look through that.
There's Who and Stones and Eagles. And
Is there been anybody that's come into the shop that you were just like, okay, I'm a little bit jarred by that?
The only person I've ever been sort of at a loss or maybe possibly starstruck was Jeff Beck. When I met Jeff, it was like, and he was really cool, but I was just afraid it would be like meeting to me the only other time was in the early, it was in summer of 80. I was in New York. We walked into a deli and John Lennon was walking out.
Oh,
it was near the Dakota, not far, Central Park, and Susie was like, "You can talk to him." No, I'm not talk. I'll say something stupid and he'll rip me to shreds. There's no. Just walk by.
Wow, that'd be pretty intense. But with Jeff, was he like coming in for the shop, or you just saw him somewhere?
I went out to the. He's a Toyota. Here.
Okay.
3 years ago, 4, 5. I have no concept.
Oh, just recently.
Since COVID, I have no concept of time. If I say yesterday, it could have been 15 years ago. I don't know.
I can see that. I feel that. What are some of your favorite guitars to play?
I sort of my idol guitar when I was a kid. After I learned to play a little bit, it was an ES335, Gibson ES335, which I have a few of those. And mainly that was because of Johnny Rivers. I remember seeing Johnny Rivers on like those afternoon teen shows or whatever, Lloyd Thaxton or whatever, and Johnny always played a red 335. It was like, I want one of those. So that's what I got. And it's funny, a friend of mine, There's a guy, Vic Dupre, who's done all the Sunburst Les Paul books, the Burst Believers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something. Now he's doing one on ES, and I'm trying to link him up with Johnny Rivers because he's one of the. But I mean, Eric Clapton played a Red 335 and Cream. Most of the Cream stuff is at 335. Alvin Lee. There's, it's the one guitar you can play any style music on, from
Right.
jazz to rock to blues, whatever, country even. Telecasters is my probably other Les Paul Juniors. Any guitar, I'm good. Any old American guitar.
Right. I feel like I blew through the questions, but I feel like I want to ask more stuff.
ahead.
Like, is there some story that, like, maybe some crazy night out with Billy or with
I
Vince?
probably can't go there.
Well, I mean, one that you could go to, like maybe not crazy in the sense that like you did something that was like, oh my God, I don't want anyone to know. More like maybe you're teching and there's something nutty happened with an instrument or like,
I've only done the teching thing for the gents. I've never. Otherwise, I've just been there selling guitars or hanging out.
Okay. When I see you hanging out, sometimes I think I'm thinking you're there working. Maybe you're just chilling.
Yeah, I mean, usually, like in St. Louis, there. Back in the late 60s, we all figured out, there were like four of us, a guy named Dan Martin, Ed Seelig, and me, and Bobby Ritzer, all figured out you could go to a show with a guitar and just go to the stage door. Back then, there was no security. They were all off-duty cops, and they'd let you in. You'd probably sell a guitar or hang out anyway and see the show. So it was like, well, this is dope, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. So that's sort of how, a lot of us got into that business.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I never thought about it.
But that's the way it was then.
Yeah.
There was no security companies it was just off-duty cops.
Well, also there wasn't.
And we were in St. Louis after a while. It was the same ones. They knew you. You show up, hey, what do you got?
All right. I mean, that's the other thing too. It's like, I mean, you don't have a shop yet at that point, so it's a good way to like get guitars in and out.
There weren't any shops. I mean, there were like music stores then, guys with suits and sheet music and guitars.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Can I help you with that?
Yeah, exactly. You're doing that wrong. Play it quieter or something.
Or don't touch that.
I mean, did you like take like music like classes like theory?
Yeah,
like,
I took theory and all that stuff in college.
Okay.
And then I took guitar lessons at Mel Bay for like 2 years, about 2.5 years. But then I just kept figuring stuff out on my own. Make my teacher mad. He goes, "You're not reading that." Maybe.
Right.
Maybe I am.
That's funny.
Because I did, that's learn to figure stuff out by ear.
Yeah,
Which is
exactly.
what most.
Yeah, I mean,
very few. Well, it's the joke of how do you get a musician? How do you, especially a guitar? How do you get a guitar player to turn down? Put sheet music in front of them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really true.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was like in choir and stuff and sax in school, but then guitar, that's all just by figuring it out. Like,
Right.
Can't tell.
Yeah, I mean that's the way.
Mm-hmm. What are there some like favorite memories at shows here in Dallas that you can think of, whether you were just there or you were playing?
Well, I started coming down here in the 80s for guitar shows.
Oh, okay.
So I was here twice a year for Dallas, which was always in March, and then Arlington around 85 or 6 is when Arlington started. But Charlie Wirtz was Charlie's Guitar Shop, is the one who started the guitar show thing. 79, I think. I may be off on the date, but somewhere around there. The first one I went to was probably around 81, 82. And then Arlington started in 86. And I've been to every one of those, except for one, I think. So that was started the whole Dallas thing, I guess. And then in 94, I was a friend of mine. We were partners at another store before that, but in 94 is when I started Killer Vintage, and I had the idea. There was the history of the Oswald picture is sort of a lineage of there was a sort of a B movie, underground movie from this little movie company in Austin, I think, called Slackers. It came out in the 80s.
Right.
There's a scene where a guy walks in with a T-shirt on, and it's just Oswald holding an SM57 mic. A friend of mine's band which had the greatest name in St. Louis, called the Swinging Love Corpses, did a poster with sort of that, but not done as well, with just Oswald and those guys standing there. Well, then I took it a step further and put the guitars in, created the logo and whatnot with everybody was cool with. So it was, as Joe Walsh said, amateurs imitate professional steel.
True. So when you were coming to those shows early Dallas, were you spending a lot of time in Dallas, just kind of in and out?
Coming on like a Thursday, load in, drag down 40 or 50 guitars and sell a bunch of them and buy some, and then go back Sunday night, go to Camp PC's and have pizza and hit the road at like 10:30, 11 and drive straight through till like 8 or 9 in the morning and get back to St. Louis.
Right.
This is a 9-hour drive.
Wow.
No matter what you do.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of blew past this Antique Roadshow.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's, I mean, Pawn Stars, I mean, that's so, like, your expertise is to the point where people, like, you're the guy, it sounds like. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, again, I have no other skills.
Yeah, but I mean, some people have one skill and nobody cares about their one skill.
Right. Well, yeah, and
So-
that happens in the guitar world too. There's one of my favorite, and this is on credit with George Gruen in Nashville. There was a guy raving to him about some instrument that he had, and on and on and on. He wasn't that interested, and finally the guy was like, "But George, this is really rare." His reply was, and this is brilliant. He goes, "Well, leprosy's rare, but nobody wants that."
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
Which can happen. I have people come in, "Oh, this is really old." I'm like, okay.
Did you ever have any dealings with Stevie Ray Vaughan?
I met Stevie when, this is an interesting story. Albert King was a St. Louis guy. Around the time they did that film up in Canada, I think it was, the TV show where it's Stevie and Albert.
Mm-hmm.
Albert's bass player, it was Albert's band. Albert's bass player is a guy named Gus Thornton. And Gus and I had been friends for years. Actually, Gus played in my band after that. Most of the 90s until around 2000, he had a heart attack. Who's since had a heart transplant, and he's still going. He's still a great bass player. Anyway, I met him through Gus briefly.
Okay. And I mean, Jimmy,
I remember the first time I saw him.
Yeah.
Had to be like 83 maybe. He opened for Huey Lewis in the News.
Huh.
And it was like, and I had dealt with Chris Hayes, Huey's guitar player, and sold him a lot of stuff. And that all those guys are really nice. And I was like, and I'd seen him before, but after Stevie, I made it through like 2 songs of Huey, and it was like, my mind's blown. I have to leave. I could
see that. It's like when Jimi Hendrix opened for the Monkees or something almost.
Well, and then the antithesis of that is in '90, Jeff Beck and Stevie were doing the tour where they'd swap opener, who would open. And they played at the Fox Theater that we spoke of earlier. Jeff opened for Stevie, and Jeff just blew the roof off the place. Stevie came out, and I'd seen Stevie a lot. He sounded great, but by the second song, it was again, I went out to the lobby. When I got in the lobby, every guitar player in St. Louis was in the lobby talking about Jeff Beck.
Oh, wow.
And then sadly, Stevie died that year.
You know what? I was in Chicago. My dad was a journalist, and there was a tour. It was going to be Buddy Guy, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray. I forget who the fourth person was.
Probably Robert Cray.
Yeah, Robert Cray. Yeah, and they had
Because that's the group that was up in.
Yeah, so they had a press conference set up, and there was 30 people going to go, and they were going to do a show. And me and my dad had tickets, and he passed away like the night before.
Oh shit! Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry about him. I'll cover my experience. But it just was a bummer.
But that's what dragged on to be that like on the edge.
Yeah.
Sorta.
I mean, in fact, it was weird because in Chicago, it was like one Sunday he died, and then Brent Midland from The Dead died the following Sunday. So I have friends that went to both those shows, and like they're like, I'm not going to any more shows. People keep dying every time I see somebody, you know.
Yeah,
But,
damn.
Yeah. What do you have any like memorable moments of shows you've either seen or been part of here in Dallas?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Jeff Beck show.
That was
in
here.
2018, I think it was. And I unfortunately missed him. He was just here in September.
Yeah.
With Ann Wilson and ZZ Top. And I had to play at the Balcony Club that night till 9. So time I got there, Jeff was just going off stage. And then afterwards, Billy and I were, this is funny, Billy and I were hanging out. And he goes, "You met Jeff before?" And I go, "Yeah." And Billy had known Jeff since he was a teenager, which I didn't realize. Billy had told me that how he met, that his, I guess, Sidewalks opened for him, or maybe it was a band before that, in Houston. And Jeff's bus or truck, whatever they had at that time, had broken down. So and their next gig was in Dallas, and Billy had a truck. So he loaded all their shit in the van, and he drove them to Dallas to make their next show. And that's when he and Jeff became friends. But that's the backstory on that.
That's cool.
But after that show, Billy and I are hanging out, and we're on the bus with his wife, Gilligan. He goes, you met Jeff? And I go, "Yeah." He goes, let's go hang out with Jeff. And I go, "All right, cool." I'm like, we get off the bus and walk out, and there's a bus pulling out, and Billy looks around and asks this guy, he goes, "Where's Jeff's bus?" And he goes, "That's it."
Oh,
it's like,
man.
damn.
Just missed it.
And then he passed away last month, or the month before.
Yeah.
Which is really sad.
Yeah, they're starting to go now, some of those guys.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. He had gotten the flu. The story I heard, he's gotten the flu, and he and his wife both. And she got better. He didn't. He was actually in the hospital on a ventilator and whatnot. And then that's where he got the meningitis, was in the hospital, which is a place you don't want to go. You don't want to go to a hospital.
Yeah, absolutely not. Wow. Do you have anything besides the stuff you're continuing to do? Anything else coming up that you want to talk about?
I mean, as far as bands, we're getting into touring season again now. Although some bands never stop. So my sort of theory is if they come see me, I'll go see them. Mm-hmm. I don't generally chase anybody anymore.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're sending a guitar to Timothy Schmidt tomorrow, Sunday. He's buying an acoustic. He called the other day. So generally higher end stuff, I don't.
Absolutely.
It doesn't go on my website. It's a phone call or two.
Sure.
Or,
do you
or
just
send Vince Gill a picture and he shows it to everybody, which is exactly what just happened.
Oh, I see. I mean, that's a pretty good recommendation, to say the least. Like, what do you think would be a good guitar?
Well, Vince is a guitar nut. I mean, his house is in his collection in his house is just. Have you ever seen the YouTube videos of? He has drawers that are like case line, like the lining of a case, and you pull them out, and there's two guitars in each one of those drawers, and there's like, I don't know how many there are of those, and then he's got a bunch on display, and it's crazy.
That is crazy.
But it's cool, and his studio is there too.
How many does he play, like, regularly, though? I mean, like, live or recording?
I don't know. He, I think he uses pretty much everything at some point, though.
Okay.
I mean, and that's what you have to do, especially if you're going to maintain a collection like that.
Yeah. Well, also, I guess when you're at that level, if you just want a different sound on every song, you can just change guitars in every song.
Well, he's, for one, with the Eagles, I know I sold him a 58 Les Paul Gold Top years ago, and he had been using that. And he had a real 59 Sunburst Les Paul that he had been on tour, and then he just told me that not this last time, but a year or so ago, that he said he wasn't taking the real 59 out anymore because he put a set of my pickups, the Betterbuckers, in a Beano reissue that Clapton had given him, which is basically an R9 or reissue of a historic 59. And he put my pickups in, and he said that's what he's using on tour now with the Eagles. He said, it sounds. Well, we sat in his house. It was 2 years ago. I drove over because I had a guitar he wanted, and went over and usually stay at his house because he and Amy have this giant place that's just two of them. But we tried his 59, a 60 Sunburst Les Paul that I brought, and his the 58 Gold Top, and that Beano with my pickups in it. There's no difference between all four of them. Minuscule. I mean, just
Huh.
it was like, wow.
Did
So-
did he agree with that? I mean, or did he hear
Well,
something?
yeah, that's why he's using it.
Yeah.
Those. I mean, Gibbons has used them. I mean, the list is pretty hefty. Keith Urban, The Edge, Doyle Bramall, George Lynch, all over. Steve Miller. They're all using my pickups.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Is there any story of like is there like any like the weirdest, way you've sold a guitar or acquired a guitar?
There are, but that's probably another episode.
Oh, okay.
I'll have to think of some of those. But,
Okay.
Oh, yeah. There's been some very strange deals.
I bet.
Very strange.
Yeah. I mean, so most people find you because just word of mouth, I guess, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, this is sort of a high-end clientele.
I don't really advertise much locally. I mean, I did do some radio a few years ago, but it didn't really seem to.
Well, the 45
Doing
people that listen to this podcast are going to be rushing you after this, I'm
All
sure.
right, well, I hope they stay in line and behave themselves.
Well, I can't promise you that. It's a very unruly crowd. This has been fantastic. I wish I could think of more things to ask because I feel like every time I say something,
Well,
something
we
else.
can just do it
follows
again.
up.
We'll both
Yeah.
make lists. How's that?
Yeah, absolutely. We shall. Thanks again for sitting with me, Dave, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.
I'd like to thank my guest, Dave Hinson. You can check out Killer Vintage Guitars and all the stuff he's got to offer out there on the internet. Theme song Unstoppable by Celine Narala. You can listen to the Dallas Famous podcast every week on Deep Ellum Radio, Sundays and Tuesdays at 1 p.m. and then again on all the podcast places. Thanks again for tuning in.